Welcome, everybody. Today we have with us Nadya Andreeva, who is the author of the #1 Amazon best-selling book on digestive health for women called Happy Belly, A Woman's Guide to Feeling Vibrant, Light, and Balanced. Thank you, Nadya, for being here today.
Thank you, John. Very official.
It's great to have you, and I'm very excited to hear about your travels and to talk about what you've discovered on your travels, and also just even the fact that you're here sharing with our readership and listeners at Joyful Belly is very exciting.
Thank you for having me, John. And you're the first Ayurvedic practitioner I'm talking about my travel experience. So I'm really excited to share everything that I have learned.
I know you barely got off the plane from
5 days.
from 10 months of traveling to 27 countries, and we were shocked by how long your travel was and how many places you've been to. We've been following you on Instagram and Facebook and enjoying your photos and updates. So how did you do it? How did you make sure that your digestion stayed regular, that you stayed healthy with all those different foods, time zones, climate, and even, whenever I travel, when I land in a new country, it's very hard to get grounded and get on your feet and even know where to find food, no less find healthy food. So, how did you do it?
It's a big question, obviously. So I'll try to pinpoint the main things. Since childhood, my digestion was always a weak point, like the weakest point, and I think that's why I was always so interested in it. So the biggest anxiety I had before we were putting everything together for our travel was how am I going to keep it all functioning smoothly. So what I did, I actually sent boxes to some places. I sent 4 boxes to
That's
major.
sneaky.
I know, right? Because we were traveling only with carry-ons.
Mhm.
So for 10 months, we only had carry-ons, no checked luggage. So there was a limited amount of herbs or teas that I could bring. Um, and I sent some things that I knew would be effective. So when we get there, as you mentioned, we don't spend days looking for stuff, especially when you go to Africa or um, to some parts of Europe. You really can't find an Ayurvedic store. You're lucky if you find a health food store, which we did. Um, but I think some of the main things for me was to have anise seeds in my purse. Instead of fennel seeds, I really like the flavor of anise better. I think it has a little sweet flavor. So there were some things that I always had in my purse, that I always had a stack in
Now,
my
why
shoulder.
anise? Surely that's not just for the flavor. There must be some medicinal reason why you had that anise
Yes.
in your purse.
Yes. So I'm sure a lot of your listeners know the famous um, fennel, cumin, coriander tea.
Yeah.
Um, which is wonderful. But the favorite spice out of those three, mine is fennel or anise. So I really like to chew on some seeds after a meal.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel that it really helps if I get bloated, even if it's a flight, not necessarily food related. Um, and another thing that I did send to most places was ginger tea, packets of ginger tea. Um, so we don't run around buying fresh ginger, even though in some places it was really easy. Like in Thailand, you can find fresh ginger almost everywhere. Um, in Iceland, not so much. um, and I also sent some bitter herbs because my system, um, I do tend to accumulate heat, especially if it's hot outside, and it can show up easily in some skin reaction or um, in my digestion or even my mood. So I had some um, roasted dandelion tea with me. And in some places during the summer, I had bumia malaki,
Mhm.
which is, I think, again, some of your readers might have heard of trifala.
Yeah.
Um, and triphala is a wonderful herb, which I love. But for some reason, for my physiology, Bhumia Malaki has more magic.
Hmm.
So those were some core things that I had with me. And I think tea packets, some fennel seeds, is essential, even if you're traveling for a short period of time. Um,
So people need to think about what they would bring on a trip with them to support their unique digestion. Maybe
yeah,
these classic digestives, anise and ginger, which are strong and pungent taste and are going to stimulate digestive juices flowing, is something that is a bit more universal. And then there are these
yes,
specific digestive tonics. In your case, you mentioned reducing heat in your system as a whole. I imagine pitta dosha as well associated with
yes.
that, that you are going to take out some of that intensity that comes when it's hot outside with bhumi amalaki, and I think you said dandelion root. And
Yeah,
what was the other one? Would you say burdock as well?
I would love some burdock, but I was taking just dandelion. Now
Okay.
that I'm back home, I can have burdock root.
All
But
right.
when you're traveling and your suitcase is limited, I think just having a couple of essentials is enough. And as you said, I think you can start with general things, but once you know your body, once you understand Ayurveda a little bit deeper, you can go more into specifics and find something that fits your physiology and the climate and the season as well.
Hmm. Now, did you mail those boxes of food, of survival supplies, weeks in advance? Where did you pick them up? I mean, how did you even know where to send them? Did you send them to a friend's
So,
house or?
well, no, I actually, because I was our travel agent
Okay,
for,
okay,
for the big part. So I created, as a pizza person, I plan everything and plan it very thoroughly. So I had an Excel spreadsheet with all the locations and countries and everything and hotels. So I send it to hotels. I would call
okay,
them in advance, ask them if it's okay to hold a small box, and most people never said no. Um, so that was kind of easy, but I sent it to three different continents where I knew it's going to be hard to find stuff.
yeah.
So one was waiting for us in Thailand, one was waiting for us in Africa, and one in Iceland. And that kind of made the most sense. But I also think that beyond um, having herbs or teas, daily routine and certain habits also have a huge, huge impact on how digestion works.
Yeah.
Um, do you do you want to talk about them, or we're gonna
Sure,
skip it?
sure. Yeah, let's keep going. That sounds like a very relevant topic when you're traveling and going through different time zones. Is what kind of routine?
Yeah, so I think going through different time zones, as we spoke briefly before the interview, our body has physiological habits, which, if they're good, it serves us. If they're not so good, um, it has negative impact on how we feel. So, um, again, since everyone is Ayurveda people here and don't mind talking about poop and digestion, most people will go to the bathroom at the same time of the day. So when you change a time zone, it will take a few days for the body to reset and get on that new time zone. So I think in the beginning, it's really important to respect that the Agni or digestive fire is a little bit weaker.
Mm.
And most people, especially if they're going on a shorter vacation, you come and you start trying all local foods and um, trying to like do all the fun stuff. A lot of people, especially if they're going on vacation, they will have foods that they usually don't have, foods that are heavier,
Yeah.
not lighter, um, which is kind of the opposite of what your body needs in the first couple of days of settling in. So one of the things that I keep as a rule is to have um, about 80% of our meals for both husband and I to be healthy, to be something that my body recognizes, something that is I know I can digest, so not something that's written in theory or paper that is easy to digest, but something I know actually makes my body feel good. And then 20% is a leeway where you can try foreign foods, you can try exotic foods, um, but don't make it 100%.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
This concept of Agni in Ayurveda being your digestive strength and is an important concept for people to use. Which what does this mean? It means with Ayurveda, you come to understand what your strength of digestion is at any particular moment, so that you can know if you're waking up in a new country somewhere, you're feeling a little bit weak, that your digestion may not be able to handle some challenge. But as soon as you're back on track and got some good rest and you're feeling better, you can be a little more adventurous with food. And that way you're in this sort of fluid dynamic where you can choose that 80% of your meals healthy, that 20% indulgence and fun, and you won't compromise your system.
yeah, and I think it's all about respecting. So you're not just doing, I think there are two ways to think about it. You can use your body. Um, I guess you can help your body and support your body, and then use your body to receive pleasure. So your body as a tool of experiencing pleasure. And over time, people will learn how to appreciate and love healthy foods as well. But in the beginning, I think for most people, food is a source of pleasure. So we're not talking about restricting yourself 100% of the time. It's more about respecting the strength of what your body can handle.
Yeah.
Another thing that I found works really well, and I think is going to be easy for people to remember, is make sure you have enough fat and fiber. Um, so in a lot of countries, unfortunately, um, having good fats will take some intention.
Yeah.
A lot of restaurants cook on bad oils. Um, it's also really easy to either go to get greasy food, or if you're being mindful of it, end up with not having enough fat, which travel increases vata, and that increases, like, it has a quality of dryness and roughness. So you do need to watch that you have enough good fats in your meals. And it can be a matter of bringing small packets, a small little plastic container of ghee, which I tried to do in the beginning. But then towards the middle, I settled on just having olive oil, which most restaurants will have olive oil. So it's easier to get steamed vegetables and ask for a side of olive oil and pour olive oil on top of vegetables, instead of having them use some sort of a soy oil or corn oil or whatever they use in the back of the kitchen to cook, like stir fry, for example, or something that has sauce. So I think having good fats, especially if you can get plant-based fats, seeds, avocados, and all that stuff, and asking for good quality olive oil. And then having enough fiber, which a lot of people forget on their vacation. And I think it's critical to first staying full, staying regular, keeping your hormones balanced. And that can come from all sources of local vegetables, fruits, whole grains, lentils, beans. You just need to kind of remember about the fat and fiber formula. Yeah. And it's good when they come together.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine dehydration can be a factor when traveling as well. Fat, fiber, and of course, when you're on those planes, the potential for dehydration, rapid dehydration, is there.
Yeah.
The air in the plane is very dry. So once you fix that acute issue of dehydration, which people pay attention to, as you said, there's certain things that people are going to easily pay attention to. And I think their hydration is something that is publicized and it's out there. People often know to stay hydrated, but what they might forget is fat and fiber, especially since they're mesmerized by all the new sites, all the potential, fun that they're going to have, or work, or whatever it is that's going on in the new place that they're in. It's easy to forget that you haven't eaten anything with fiber in it in the last 2 days,
Yeah.
or that your fats, as you said, paying attention to that you're getting enough fats, but also the quality of the fats. So
And I think the quality of the fats is even more important than the quantity, because if you get the wrong fats, the inflammatory effect can actually be much more than the healing effect of the good fats that we can get. And what you said about hydration, I think a lot of people remember about hydration because it's such a big thing. Drink 8 glasses of water. But just as a reminder, which I'm sure you reminded your people so many times, is it really comes down to how you hydrate and with what. So for me, for many years already, I always go around, even if I leave the house for 2 hours, I have a thermos with me. Um, and now I have a beautiful thermos, so I actually feel like a girl carrying it around. Um, but I think having small sips of warm water or hot water, if it's cold outside, is actually a lot more helpful than gulping a glass of cold water that you get at the restaurant.
yeah,
Um, so it's a matter of, again, being prepared and having the tools of having your favorite thermos, or asking the hotel room that you have a kettle in the room, which most hotels will gracefully give it to you, so you can have your warm water. If you want, you can add lime or lemon, or just have plain water first thing in the morning. And over time, it builds as a habit, so it is part of your daily routine.
yeah. That kettle in the room is a can be a godsend.
Yes.
There are many times where I've been traveling where I'll pack some oatmeal
Mm-hmm.
in my bag because it's a dried good, non-perishable. And then when I get to the hotel, I'll make a little bowl of oatmeal with that boiled water, and suddenly I'm freed up from having to eat all 3 meals a day out in a new place. But I can
Yep.
relax and take a slow morning and still feel nourished and healthy because I can boil water in the hotel room and
Yep.
pour it over those oats. So use that kettle in the hotel room for hydration, but also you it gives you that possibility of a breakfast too. So
I'll give you one
yeah,
trick that I did in some hotel rooms. So same thing. If you want a snack or if you want an easy to digest breakfast, what I would do is I would leave the lid open and cut up an apple there and let it almost steam. So while the water is boiling, if the lid is open, the kettle is not going to turn off.
mm.
So the apple will boil,
Huh.
um, and you can have like a nice. You can have oatmeal. You can have an apple. Um, you can even add some pieces of ginger and make nice ginger tea. So yeah, it's definitely super helpful.
Yeah, it's amazing how innovative you can be with just some hot water and a bowl.
Yes. Yeah, it's endless. You can add chia seeds, um, oatmeal. So definitely.
Yeah, so did you have any digestive problems while you were traveling? Any bloating, any constipation, any weaker digestion, or do you feel like these tips were enough, or what did you do for extra protection when those symptoms arose? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So there were a few times when digestion can get off. So for me, the first symptom was if I get bloated, then the next meal has to be much lighter and it has to be warm.
Hmm.
Um, so one of the things that when I was just starting to learn about Ayurveda, for me, before that, healthy meant vegetables and salads were included, and which is super healthy. But the question is, can you digest it?
Yeah.
So for me, understanding the importance of warming food, whether they're warm in temperature or warm by their qualities, let's say lemon or beets, was a game changer because including, for example, some beets, roasted beets, or asking for like a beet and walnut salad, which a lot of restaurants will have in many different parts of the world. And having soups as a go-to meal if I know something is off with my stomach was super helpful. And that tip with boiled apple in a kettle um, is actually from our trip to Bali, where you come to Bali, it's beautiful. There's tons of vegan and vegetarian restaurants and tons of juice places. And it's hot, it's tropical, so it's a perfect environment during the day to have a juice. But once you go a little bit away from the center of the, I guess, touristy areas, the juice places, I guess, I don't know, maybe they're not as clean, maybe they don't clean the juices well, but basically one of the juices did not have such a positive effect on my stomach. And for a few days, I just listened to my body, and the only thing my body wanted was steamed apples and pears. So for a day, I just stayed off anything else and had that very gentle fiber and a little bit of carbs to keep my energy up. And that worked perfectly. I didn't need any additional medicine for that time. So I think it's really important to listen to your body and respect the hunger.
Yeah. So listening to you brought up a few times in our talk today. This idea of respecting the body and listening to the body, which I know is so important in Ayurveda, and it makes the difference between um, hearing which kinds of foods are healthy and knowing which kinds of foods are healthy. You talked about this earlier, not just looking up in a book what foods are easy to digest, but knowing what your specific body can digest. So, since that's such an important part of Ayurveda, respecting the body, listening to the body, and since people don't really know what that even means to respect their body or listen to their body, or perhaps they have some notion of that, but not really an Ayurvedic understanding of that, perhaps you could give us some ideas. What does it mean to listen to your body when it comes to eating food?
Mm-hmm. I think it starts kind of as with almost any relationship, is to start having somewhat of a dialogue. So it's a matter of mentally evaluating first thing in the morning, what's my energy level? What's my hunger level? Because most people eat because it's time to eat.
Mm-hmm.
But in mindfulness practices, in mindful eating, for example, we can rate the hunger level on a scale from 1 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about physical hunger, right? Hunger is something that's consistent. It's growing with time. It's very different from just appetite. And making a rule for yourself mentally that I eat the food when I'm hungry at around 7.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're at a 1 or 2 or 3, maybe it's just a matter of having some water. And also mentally checking in with yourself after food. How do I feel? What's my energy level? Do I feel bloated? Um, do I have any discomfort, or am I full of energy and feel like it's really my food? Like for me, as a nicely made lentil soup, it's my food. I can eat it from morning until evening. And the same goes with buckwheat. I think it's um, my genetic food from that came from my ancestors. Um, and over time, through that dialogue, we can create our own mental picture to know, how does hunger feel? How does it feel when I actually don't need any food?
Mm-hmm.
And not be afraid of um, sometimes skipping a meal or having a lighter meal. Because sometimes there will be days when your body says, I don't need anything right now. And because we are attached to the meal times and attached to the idea that something bad will happen if we skip a meal, we usually do eat even if the body is not ready to digest.
So not what we think we should do, but by dialogue, asking internally, how am I feeling? What does my body want right now? What were the effects after the eating? this is what you mean by dialogue, is to check in
Yeah.
and remember to feel what's happening, not just follow a formula.
Yes, to feel, and I think one of the easiest ways to feel is to breathe into your belly. Because, and another thing that I found that actually works, interestingly, if we're staying stagnant, if we're staying static for a long period of time, it becomes harder to feel the body. So if you're sitting all day, it's harder to feel the body. If you take a walk or if you move, for somebody it can be yoga, but I think a walk is the easiest, you actually start feeling the body.
Hmm.
So sometimes when you sit down, there's like, I want something, and a lot of people will take that I want something as I want food. But in reality, if you take a short walk, you're like, I'm not really actually hungry. Maybe I'm just tired or bored or annoyed. Um, so I think it's a matter of being mindful of the body that comes from movement and paying attention to how you feel.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So, if it's not possible to have a regular dinacharya or a regular routine while you are traveling, then you have to pay close attention to what your body is saying, so that even if it's sunrise outside, it might still be nighttime in with regards to your circadian rhythms. Maybe you need to stay in bed a little longer or eat some different foods, and you're going to discover that by tuning in and looking inward and seeing how you feel. Is that the idea? Is that how you kept
I
your
think I
routine
think
on the
that,
road?
well, I'll mention about the routine if we have time, but what I wanted to say is we're not talking about just listening to your body, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about using a combination of internal and external wisdom. So there's a wisdom that your body has,
Mm-hmm.
and that's been there for generations, that's accessible to you when you listen. But there's also external wisdom and external sources of wisdom that are awesome. So you don't have to learn everything from scratch on your own.
Yeah.
So I think it has to be a combination. We don't take any theory or advice as a given. We question it, we experiment, and then see if it actually works for us.
Mm-hmm.
But also, before we do that, it helps to understand the theory, to actually follow the rules, to stick to something long enough to understand if it works for you. So if somebody is trying to move to an Ayurvedic dinacharya, the first week will be like, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to wake up before sunrise, but it's probably because you've never done that.
Yeah.
So I think it's easy to say, listen to your body, do what your body says, but also your body has to be in a good enough condition, and you need to be able to understand the language of your body to interpret it correctly. Because otherwise, it's really easy to say, well, if I listen to my body, I'm just going to lay on the couch and eat the ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, your body is really wise, especially wise when it's really healthy.
Mm.
So I think it's an important thing to mention.
Yeah, to go to experts who have studied this in the past and get some ideas from them and test those ideas on your system and see if they work.
Yes, yes,
All right, great. Well, now that you are back from your, again, I'm just going to say it again, 10 months of traveling to 27 countries, what are you going to do now? And what possibly could I don't know what kind of experience could possibly top. I mean, it's a tough act to follow, right?
yeah.
After traveling to so many countries, and then you come back, all those experiences, all that excitement. What are you going to do now that you're back?
That's an interesting question. I'm giving myself space to kind of decide where I want to put my energy and attention,
Hmm.
which I think through this trip, my awareness is much deeper because I had time to move away from the routine, from the day to day work. And while I worked on the road, I worked mostly with my Russian audience, and we led a huge spring cleanse.
Hmm.
Um, we had almost 10,000 women participating. So I think because there's more of a need in the Russian society, because there's a lack of that knowledge still, I feel like I'm more needed there. But at the same time, I'm looking forward to coming back to regular writing and hopefully do more interviews and conversations with people like you, because there's something very special about hearing stories and hearing personal experiences, not just reading the theory, because online now you can find answers to almost anything.
Yeah.
But it's helpful to hear somebody talk through that, share their experience, and have more of an emotional connection, which I think you can through a video interview. So I really like that aspect.
Yeah, me too. Me too. All right, here's a question that I love to ask everyone we interview
Mm-hmm.
about food. What is your favorite food? And since Ayurveda is all about your body's reaction to food and experience of eating food, can you tell us a bit of what it's like to eat your favorite food? What kind of experience is it?
Mm-hmm. So it's a very interesting question. And for me personally, my favorite foods have shifted so much in the past 10 years. I think if you asked me that question 10 years ago, I would probably choose some sort of a sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, from cookies to bread pudding. I remember I would go through stages, and at one point where I just started studying Ayurveda or started reading about Ayurveda and working with an Ayurvedic practitioner to solve my own problems, my favorite food was rice pudding.
Mm-hmm.
Rice pudding with cardamom, I could like eat it day and night. But now, after traveling for 10 months, an interesting thing had happened. In the beginning of the trip, there were some foods that I was missing. And what I noticed that it is some sort of an attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And since I have quite a long yoga practice and meditation practice, for me, it was one of those things that once you realize that you have an attachment, in a way, it's not complete freedom. So it was a little bit of an interesting process to work through letting go of an attachment, letting go of having to have something. So there are foods that I appreciate, but there's not one food in the world that if it disappears from planet Earth, that I would miss.
Yeah.
Which is, for me, is a, now looking back from 10 months, and now it's a very interesting feeling to have. It's a sense of complete freedom.
Mm-hmm.
I can enjoy whatever is on my plate.
Mm-hmm.
So coming to a restaurant, I would like to have vegetables. I would love to have a lentil soup, but I'm not attached to what kind of vegetables they are.
Yeah.
So usually, and we had one time in Cambodia where we asked vegetables, and the guy was like, "We don't really have any vegetables." And my husband went to the fridge and was like, "Oh, there's green beans. Those are vegetables." um, so for me, it's more about appreciating what I can have without making my life uncomfortable searching for a particular food.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to spend an hour waiting in line to a restaurant to experience a certain food. There's more useful things to do with my time and energy.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of experience, um, I use an app that tracks my habits. And one of the habits that I started tracking this year was to pray before food, which I always loved the idea of it, but I could never connect with it. It never became a part of me. So over the past several months, it slowly became a part of me where I can sit down and just for a moment connect with the food and bless it, and to bless the food so it turns into healthy tissues and nourishes my body. And another thing that happened over the last 10 months is I would often listen to lectures. I wouldn't read, I wouldn't watch TV, wouldn't check email as some people do, but I would listen to lectures, and it seemed more productive for me to eat and listen to lectures because you're like doing two things at once. And now finally, my body, my physiology, and emotionally, I evolved enough not to need anything while I eat.
Hmm.
So I can actually eat and it doesn't feel empty to me. It doesn't feel like I need to do something else to make it productive time.
Yeah, this is a challenge for Pitta dosha in general, is to not try to make every moment count, not try to make every
Yes.
get the extract as much as possible from every second of the day. What a huge challenge for Pitta type constitution to
Yep.
overcome.
And I think for me, tracking it and apps are amazing. Like you can find some apps that will change your life.
Well,
So
let's hear the app. What's what's this habit app?
it's called A Way of Life.
A way of life. Okay.
Yes. And I track now 28 things per day. I would
28 things.
I would recommend starting with one or two. Um, but it has changed so many things for me because whatever we track, we change.
Yeah.
And for me, having that quiet time, not just focusing on what I'm eating, but having that time was a game changer also.
Yeah. Fascinating. Great.
Yeah.
Nadya, thank you for sharing all that you have shared today. How can people learn more from you? What's a resource that they can use to just hear more about what you've learned about food?
My website is spinachandyoga.com, and I have lots of articles there, which I think is a good way. Also on YouTube, I've done lots of interviews with various experts. So if you search Nadya Andreeva on YouTube, you can find lots of interesting interviews. And I also have a book. It's called Happy Belly, as you mentioned in the beginning. You can find it on Amazon. And I think it's a great way to introduce yourself to mindful eating, to healthy eating, especially if you have problems with bloating and irregularity, and especially if you're a woman.
All right. Great. Thank you, Nadya. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.